What really happened to the man who vanished after an alien encounter? On a cold and dark October night in 1995, in the small and little-known town of Bend, Oregon, a terrifying event forever changed the lives of its inhabitants. What you are about to see is incredible, a story that changed the course of history for an entire community. A secret that has been hidden for years will finally be revealed. Prepare yourself to discover the truth behind the mysterious case of the man who vanished after an alien encounter. Are you ready to know the truth? In this video, you will find a journey that will take you to the limits of your imagination, exploring deep emotions and situations that evoke empathy and fear. Follow the most emotional story of an ordinary man who found himself involved in something much bigger than he could ever imagine. And, in the end, we will reveal something mysterious that will leave you perplexed. John Miller was an ordinary man, a 42-year-old carpenter living a quiet life in Bend, Oregon. He was known in the community for his skilled work and friendly nature. John had a loving wife, Sarah, and 2 children, Emily and Jake, who were the center of his world. His life was simple but happy, filled with precious moments with his family and friends. But on one fateful night, everything changed. It was an October night in 1995, and John was returning home after a long day at work. He drove his old sedan along the winding roads that cut through the forest, eager to get home and rest. The sky was covered by a dense fog, and the cold air heralded the arrival of winter. John felt a chill run down his spine as he drove, but he attributed it to fatigue and the cold. He had no idea that he was about to experience something that would change his life forever. Suddenly, John's car engine began to fail. He tried to maintain control, but the car stopped completely in the middle of the deserted road. John got out of the car, frustrated and worried. He grabbed a flashlight and began to inspect the engine, trying to figure out what had happened. The road was deserted, and the silence of the night was almost deafening. What could have caused the engine to fail? Would he be able to fix the car and get home on time? It was then that he saw something that left him paralyzed with fear. A bright light descended from the sky, illuminating the entire area. The light was so intense that John had to cover his eyes. He tried to move, tried to scream, but it was as if he were trapped in a nightmare. The light approached closer and closer, and John felt a strange presence around him. What was that light? Where did it come from? And why was it approaching him? John was paralyzed with fear as the light approached. He couldn't move, couldn't scream. It was as if an invisible force was holding him in place. The light was so bright that he could barely see, and the heat emanating from it was almost unbearable. What was happening? Was he dreaming? Or was he living a nightmare? The light finally stabilized, and John could see more clearly. But before we continue, I need to know if you are ready to discover the most intriguing and emotional stories of the universe. Then, subscribe to our channel to receive all YouTube notifications and discover incredible cases in our next videos. What happens when you come face to face with something that challenges all your beliefs? John Miller found out the hard way. It was a spaceship, something he had never seen before. The ship hovered silently in the air, and a door opened, revealing beings not of this world. He felt an invisible force pulling him toward the ship. He was taken inside the spaceship, where he was subjected to terrifying experiments. The aliens, with their large eyes and gray skin, showed no emotion as they performed their procedures, and their movements were precise and calculated. John tried to fight, tried to scream, but it was useless. He was trapped, at the mercy of beings he couldn't understand. He found himself in a completely strange environment. The walls were made of a material he had never seen before, glowing with a soft, pulsating light. The air was cold and sterile, and there was a constant hum that seemed to come from all directions. John was placed on a cold metal table, and strange instruments were used on his body. He felt intense pain, but also a sense of disconnection, as if he were floating outside himself. He didn't know how much time had passed, but it seemed like an eternity. What did these beings want with him? Why was he chosen? And what would happen next? You also need to know that if you leave a like on this video, YouTube will see that you liked it and will suggest this video to more people. This way, you help our channel. Can I count on you? The experiments began with a series of physical examinations. The aliens used instruments John had never seen before. They scanned his body with bright lights, inserted needles into his skin, and collected samples of his blood. John felt intense pain, but also a sense of disconnection, as if he were floating outside himself. He didn't know how much time had passed, but it seemed like an eternity. At one point, John felt intense pressure in his head, as if something were trying to enter his mind. He saw strange and unfamiliar images, as if he were being forced to see memories that were not his own. What were these beings doing to him? Were they trying to control his mind? Or were they just collecting information? Amid the experiments, John began to hear voices in his mind. They were strange voices that seemed to come from all directions. They spoke in a language he couldn't understand, but somehow he knew what they were saying. It was as if the aliens were communicating telepathically with him. The voices said things John couldn't comprehend. They spoke of other worlds, ancient civilizations, and the quest for knowledge. John felt a mix of fear and fascination. He was trapped, at the mercy of beings he couldn't understand, but he was also discovering things that challenged all his beliefs. As the experiments continued, John felt a growing sense of disconnection. It was as if he were floating outside himself, observing everything from afar. He didn't know how much time had passed, but it seemed like an eternity. At one point, he felt a wave of heat coursing through his body, as if something were being injected into his veins. What was that? Were the aliens trying to modify his body? Or were they just collecting more information? And then, as suddenly as it began, it all ended. John was returned to the road, his car still parked in the same spot. But he was no longer the same. He was shaken, traumatized, and couldn't understand what had happened. He tried to start the car, and this time the engine worked. He drove home in a state of shock, trying to process what he had experienced. When he arrived home, his wife Sarah immediately noticed that something was wrong. John tried to explain, but his words came out confused and disjointed. He couldn't find the right words to describe what had happened. He was alone in his struggle, trying to understand what he had experienced and what it meant for his life. In the days that followed, John tried to return to his normal life, but it was impossible. He was haunted by the memories of the encounter, and his health began to deteriorate. Sarah, worried about her husband, insisted that he seek help, but John knew that no one would believe him. He was alone in his struggle, trying to understand what he had experienced and what it meant for his life. The community of Bend began to notice the changes in John. He became reclusive, paranoid, and started talking about beings from another world. Some thought he was crazy, others felt sorry for him, but no one knew the truth. What really happened to John Miller? Had he really encountered aliens, or was it all a figment of his troubled mind? The emotional story of John is already worth your comment, isn't it? So, comment if you know any story like this. Your participation is very important to us. The truth behind this story is more complex than anyone could imagine. John Miller disappeared suddenly, leaving behind a shocked community and a desperate family. The local police launched an intense search, but found no trace of John. It was as if he had simply vanished from the face of the earth. But what is even more incredible is that years later, a diary was found in an abandoned cabin in the mountains of Bend. The diary belonged to John Miller and contained terrifying details about his encounter with the aliens. Now, you won't believe what happened next. The diary of John Miller revealed that he was not the only one to have these encounters. There were others, many others, who were also taken and subjected to the same experiments. And this is where the story gets really interesting. John Miller did not disappear by chance. He was chosen. But why? And by whom? The true story behind his disappearance is darker than anyone could imagine. Discover what is hidden in the pages of this diary and prepare for a revelation that will surprise you. The most surprising discovery of all is that John Miller was not taken by aliens. He was taken by a secret organization that was conducting experiments on humans, using the guise of alien encounters to cover their activities. A case that will leave you perplexed, revealing the truth behind one of the most intriguing mysteries in history. And finally, the truth behind this story is revealed. John Miller was a victim of a conspiracy much larger than anyone could imagine. An event that changed everything, leaving a community in shock and a family searching for answers. The most incredible transformation of a story that began as a mystery and ended as a shocking revelation. Watch this video that is being suggested to you. Thank you for joining us.